Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist, and we are nearing the end. This is the last substantive lesson in the course where we're going to learn something new on the guitar, and then we'll have one more lesson that'll be songs that use the material from this lesson, and then there'll be one little sort of coda lesson, which is just sort of wrapping up the course and pointing you to some resources to help you with the next things that you might want to try to learn on the guitar if you've gotten all the way through this course. So let's go ahead and get started with this lesson. This lesson is about power chords, And I want to remind you that there is a chart, a PDF of all the chords that I'm going to cover in this lesson in the description of the video. So just click on that and you can download that one and have it in front of you while you're practicing. Although I don't think this one's terribly complicated really in terms of the chord chart, so you don't necessarily need it to get through the lesson, but it's there for your future reference as well, okay? All right, let's talk about power chords, what they are and how they're used. First of all, I just wanted to say they're everywhere. Power chords, you use them constantly all the time, especially in rock music, but everywhere else too. But they're just in just every rock song you can think of pretty much. There's some representation of power chords or a way to play it using power chords. There's so many, but they're everywhere else too. All kinds of pop music use power chords. There's a lot of use of power chords in country music. They are, however, more likely, quite a bit more likely, to be used with an electric guitar than with an acoustic guitar. And so you actually do see less use of power chords in folk music because those are so focused on the acoustic guitar. And some kinds of country music too won't have a lot of power chords in them that are really acoustic guitar focused. But you'll definitely see it when they get the electric guitar out. You're going to see a lot of power chords. So they're really everywhere. They're a really important thing to learn. Now, because they are more associated with electric guitar playing, I actually got out an electric guitar to demonstrate certain things about power chords today. But you can do this whole lesson with an acoustic guitar too. Okay, so I just wanted to be able to cover a couple of specific things that come up with power chords, and so I got the electric guitar out to show you that. Okay. Very often, power chords are paired with, I guess you'd say, when you use distortion or overdrive. When you have an electric guitar and it sounds clean, it sounds like this. But then tons and tons of songs use some kind of overdrive or distortion that gives it more of this kind of sound. Okay, and so when you have that kind of distortion thing going on, power chords tend to come up a lot more. And I'm going to talk about why before we get done with the end of the lesson, okay? But when you're hearing that distorted kind of sound, very, very often, the majority of the time, power chords are involved in that kind of playing, okay? All right, so what actually is a power chord? What does that mean? Well, it's a chord, quote unquote, chord that only has the first and the fifth in the chord, okay? When we've been talking about a major chord, we've included the first, the third, and the fifth. That's the triad that makes up the major chord. But with a power chord, you don't use the third. It's just the first and the fifth. So the root note and the fifth make up the power chord, okay? So in a sense, it's not really a chord because technically, for something to be a chord, it has to have at least 3 notes in it, okay? Now, you don't have to obey that nomenclature, that naming, okay? But, as I said in an earlier video, if you call something with just 2 notes, which is just an interval, if you call that a chord, some of the purists will get on your case, okay? So just be aware that people are going to do that if you if you say that, if you call it a chord with just two notes, okay? But we call these things power chords, and everybody calls them power chords, and so just know that that's perfectly okay, and it's not going to hurt anybody for you to call it a chord or a power chord, okay? But the key issue with the power chord is that there's no third in the chord, okay? That's the most important thing to remember, all right? When someone's calling for a power chord in a chart or something, they will say, they would just write the letter and a 5 after it. That's the typical way that a power chord is conveyed in print. So A5, E5, G5. That means just the root and the fifth are involved in the chord. That's the power chord, okay? All right. How do you play a power chord? This is so easy, so simple. And it's because you're only playing two notes, and that's a simple thing to do, okay? And so, and you're going to play the first and the fifth when you do that, okay? So if you take any note on the guitar, just take the first one, the open E. Remember, the next string over is the fourth, right? And so if we go up one more step from the fourth, we'll be at the fifth, okay? So two more frets higher on the next string over, okay, that's the note that you need to get the fifth. So you've got your first, your E, and your fifth is your B. And those two notes together are the power chord. That's the E power chord, the E5, okay? And if you do that anywhere on the guitar, you've got a power chord. So you just pick any old note. Let's pick this one, okay? Fifth fret on the A string, that's a D note. And if I go to the next string over on the D string, and I go up 2 frets from where I'm at, I'll be up here on the 7th fret, and that is a D power chord. Okay? I've got my first, my D, I've got my fifth, my A, and I've got a power chord. Okay. The one I have a chart here for you is the G power chord. Okay, so here's the G note, is the 3rd fret on your E string, and then up to and over 1 string is a D. That's the 5th of the G scale, right? And so those two are your G power chord. Okay. Typically, we play that with our first finger. Our index finger is playing the lower note, the root, and then our 3rd finger, our ring finger, is playing the higher note on the next string, playing the D, in this case, the 5th. And that's all there is to a power chord. It's only 2 notes. Easy to fret and easy to understand, okay? It's very, very straightforward. And you just move that anywhere, just like you do your bar chords, and you've got a power chord. You just got to remember, you're only playing those 2 strings. So you're not playing any of the rest of your strings. They're all power chords that I played using my first finger and my ring finger, my 3rd finger. Okay? And I just slid it around and moved it around different strings. Anytime you have that relationship between the two, you've got a power chord. Okay? So on the G, if I go over 1 set of strings, so I've got my index finger on the 3rd fret of my A string, and I've got my ring finger on the 5th fret of my D string, that's a C power chord. Okay? So here's a G on the first 2 strings, and then here's a C power chord on the second 2 strings. Okay? Now, the reason I'm emphasizing that is because how you know what the root note is and how the chord is named is based on the note that your index finger is playing. So when I'm playing the G1 down here on my E string, I'm playing a G note with my first finger, and so that's a G power chord. That's a G5. Okay. When I go over here, 1 set of strings, the C note is the one I'm playing with my index finger, and so that's a C power chord, a C5. And so anywhere I am if I just look where my index finger is when I'm playing a power chord, that'll tell me what note it is. So if I'm up here on my D string and my G string, I'm playing a G note with my index finger, so that's a G power chord. Anywhere I go, down here, this is a B flat power chord, because that's the note I'm playing with my index finger, and so on, okay? So when you see that, you just gotta get your index finger to the right place. Let's say it's C. Okay, so I get my index finger to C, and then I play up 2 frets on the next string over beside it, and I got a C power chord. Okay? Or a B, down 1 fret. There's my B note. There's my B power chord. Okay? Very straightforward. If you think about it for a second, you will probably realize that what you're doing is just playing a small piece of your E form and your A form bar chords, right? Okay, so this was our G. Remember our G bar chord? We're barring across the 3rd fret with our index finger, and then we've got our other fingers imitating the E, and so that's our G bar chord. And what we're doing is we're just playing the first 2 notes of that right here, just lifting up our pinky and our middle finger, and we still got our first finger down on the G from our bar, and we've got our 3rd finger down on the B note on the next string. So it's just the lowest part of the bar chord that we're playing when we play a power chord. Okay, same thing with the C one. Okay, this was our C bar chord. Then we played with the A form, so we've got our ring finger covering those 3 strings. Up here, our D string, G string, and our B string. That was our C. That's our C bar chord. But if we just let everything up except our index finger, gonna not play this first string, but we're gonna have our index finger on that C note, and then we're gonna have the first note that we were holding with our little mini bar up here on the next string, on the D string. That's just 2 notes out of that C bar chord. That was the bar chord. Now we're just playing these 2 notes. And that's the C bar chord. So the bar chords are just a smaller, truncated version of those bar chords, okay? When you play, you got to just get those 2 strings, okay? So if you're not on the lowest 2 strings to play your bar chords, if you're somewhere else, you got to mute the lower strings or not hit them, okay? It's not too hard to not hit them, but I usually let my middle finger just go over there when I'm playing like that and just mute that string. So it's easier for me to just hit those 2 strings, and then I mute this one in case I accidentally hit the E string. I don't have to worry about it. Okay. So now you've got your basic bar chords down, and you understand how they match up with your bar chords. Okay. Now, when you're playing them open, of course, the lowest string on the lowest string, the open string, you only need to play for the E. You only need to play 1 note, right? Because you're getting your open E here, and then you're getting your 5th on your B string, or I'm sorry, the B note on the A string over here. So you just need to use 1 finger to play that power chord, okay? When one of the strings is open. If you go over 2 strings from there, you've got an open A, and then you've got your E note on the D string. Okay, so again, you only need 1 finger to get that bar chord. Okay, E bar chord, A bar chord. I mean, not bar chord, power chord. Okay, E. Okay. Now, there's a second way that people often and very, very commonly play a power chord, which is they add a 3rd note in there. They add a 3rd note in there. It's not the 3rd though, it's a repeat of the root note. So they play the root note, they play the 5th, and then they play the root note again an octave higher. Okay? So you get 2 of that root note and you get the fifth. Okay, that's another common way of doing this. How do you do that? Well, let's go back to our G real quick. We had our G power chord like this. We're just playing two notes. And to get the octave, it's just the one right next to our ring finger. Okay, so we'll be playing on also, so we're playing the 3rd fret. That's our low root note on the E string. And then we've got our 5th, the D note on the A string. And then right beside it on the D string, the next string over, we're also playing on the 5th fret. We put our pinky down there, and that gives us the high G. So that's one octave higher than our root note. So now we've got 3 notes in our power chord. So we're only playing those first 3 strings. And you can always do that with the power chord. So the next one over beside it, if we go over one set of strings, so we've got our C on that we're playing on the 3rd fret of the A string. We've got our G that we're playing on the D string on the 5th fret. And then right next to it, we'll put our pinky down. And that gives us the octave of the C. So now we've got the 3 notes, C, G, and C again. So again, we've got 3 notes, but it's just the 1st and the 5th. There's still no 3rd in that power chord, and there never will be a 3rd in a power chord. It's not a power chord anymore if you do that, okay? But that's another way that people will play a power chord, and it just gives it a little bit more of a fuller and more trebly kind of a sound to have that additional note in the chord. So people very, very commonly do that when they're playing power chords, okay? So those are the 2 basic fundamental ways to play the power chord, and you just slide them around all over the neck, remembering that your index finger is telling you what the root note is and the name of the chord is. Okay? You can do both of those. All right. Now, there's other versions of the power chord, and anytime you're playing a chord that has just the 1st and the 5th in it, then you are playing a power chord. And it doesn't matter what the combination of 1st and 5th is. If it's just the 1st and the 5th, it's a power chord, okay? And I want to show you 2 that come up a lot, okay, that you often play. And the first one is another version of the G power chord. We were just playing this one, but there's a different one that people use all the time. And it is often called the G rocker chord, or the rocker G chord, okay? Because it's a power chord, okay? But the way that it's played is like this, okay? So we have our regular G chord, you will recall, with our playing the 3rd fret on an E string. We're playing the 2nd fret on the A string. That's a B note, okay? And then we've got an open D, an open G. We've got an open B, and then we've got that high G. We're playing on the 3rd fret of the E string, okay? I know you remember that and have that down by now, but you'll notice in that chord there are 2 B's, and B is the 3rd of the G, okay? And so if we want to turn that into a power chord, we have to get rid of those B's. How do we do that? Well, this is the way it's most typically done. You just, first of all, you don't play the low one at all. You just mute it. And you can do that either by picking up your index finger a little bit, enough so you're just touching it instead of fretting it, or you can block it with your middle finger that's playing that low G note. Just lean it over a little bit like that, so it's touching the A string and it stops it from playing, okay? But then we've got this other one, this open D up here. And so what do we do with that? Well, what we do is we take our ring finger that we were using for the 3rd fret of the E string to play a G note, and we're going to move that over right beside it to the 3rd fret of the B string, and that is a D there, okay? So if we fret that B string instead of playing it open, we're going to have a D note. And then we use our pinky to re-grab that high G up there, okay? So we've got a G, On our lowest string that we're playing, we're blocking the next string. Then we've got a D, then we've got a G, those are both open. Then we've got a D that we're playing on the B string, and then another G on the high E string, okay? So now we've only got D's and G's, and D is the fifth of G. So we've only got ones and fives, so now we've got a power chord. And that's called the rocker G chord. And you hear that all the time in rock music. Go listen to Journey songs. Neil Schon is constantly playing a rocker G. Okay, that's one of his kind of mainstays. They play a lot of songs in G, and he's playing distorted guitar, so he wants that power chord sound, but he wants a nice full thing, not just two notes. He wants a bunch of notes going across a bigger range of the guitar, and so he plays that rocker G chord all the time when he's playing a G. Okay. Let me go to one more power chord before we're done looking at how to play power chords, and that's a D power chord. Now you can play it up here with two notes. Okay, we were doing that already, or the three-note version. Okay, but there's another way to do it down here where we played our regular old D chord that we've been playing throughout the whole course. Okay, all right. Now in that chord, we're blocking the lowest string. Remember, we've got an open A, we've got an open D, then we've got another A. We're fretting the G string on the second fret, that's giving us an A, and then we've got a D on the B string on the third fret, and then we have an F sharp on the E string on the top, okay, the second fret. And that's the third, so we got to get rid of that if we're going to have it be a power chord. The other notes we have are just A's and D's, and A is the fifth of D, so we'll have a power chord if we can just get rid of that F sharp. And so all we do is lift our finger up and mute it, okay? And again, you can mute it by just putting the same finger you're using to fret it, just put it on lightly instead of pressing it down, or you can easily block it with your ring finger that's playing that D note. Just lean over a little bit like that, and just touch it enough to stop it from playing. And now you've got a D power chord instead of a D chord because you're blocking out that F sharp note, the third. Okay? All right. These chords are super useful in lots of different ways. And there's kind of two reasons, I guess, why that's the case. The first one is they're ambiguous. Okay, they don't do a lot to define what the chord is, right? And every chord that we have learned in this entire course has the first and the fifth in it. Every single chord that we've learned has all the minors and minor sevenths and major seventh chords. They still all have the fifth in them. And so if you can play a power chord with any of those chord forms, if somebody else, the piano or whatever, is playing those chords, you can play a power chord. It'll sound just fine. They're playing those notes too in the chords that they're playing, right? And so it opens up the sound a lot when you play a power chord because you don't have all those other notes crowding in there and defining what's going on. It also is handy if you're kind of in a rush and you're making you're afraid of making a mistake or something like that. Well, if you're not sure what to do, play a power chord. You'll probably be okay. All right, that's a great garage band technique. If you can't quite figure out what they're doing, play a power chord. Play the first and the fifth. You'll probably be fine, unless you're getting into some much more complicated stuff than the music we've been dealing with. You're probably going to have the first and the fifth in the chord, and you're going to be fine. Okay, so that's one reason why they're super useful, just because they're easy to play, they're easy to apply. So, you know, when in doubt, go to a power chord, okay? But the other reason that they're so useful and popular is that, you know, distorted guitar sounds are extremely popular, and they're in all kinds of music, and especially in rock music and pop music, but in country music too. Distorted guitar is used a lot. And so whenever you have that overdrive sound or that distorted sound, and the more of it you use, well, if you're playing full chords with thirds in them and other notes, I mean, they just get sounding kind of muddy with the distortion, okay? And why does that happen? Well, it happens because distortion, when you add distortion to your guitar, it brings out the harmonics of the string. Okay, what are the harmonics? What are the harmonics? Well, this is kind of, this is something I could spend a whole lesson on as an aside or something, talking about what harmonics are. There's all this mathematical stuff that's associated with it and everything. But let me give you just a quick little primer on harmonics here. Harmonics come about because when you pluck a string on a guitar, or any string, okay, it's vibrating, obviously, that's what's making the sound. But we tend to think of it vibrating from the nut to the bridge. That's where it's vibrating, right? Right? And the note that we get from that vibration, from the nut to the string, that's the main note that we hear. Ball. That's the E, okay? So from there to there, it's vibrating at a certain rate, and that's the main thing we hear. But that's not all that's happening on the string. There's other vibrations happening at the same time. Look at this little chart right here, okay? This is part, not everything, this is part of what's happening when you strike a guitar string, okay? So first of all, it's vibrating from the nut to the bridge. That's the top one here in this little chart, and that's the main note we hear. But it's doing other things too, and it's setting up other waves in there that are going on at the same time. And one of them is it's doing two waves from the nut to the bridge. There's one wave that's happening from the end to the middle, and then there's another one that's happening from the middle up to the top, right? So that's the second one on this chart. So that's happening too at the same time, all right? And I can demonstrate that by, if I put my finger exactly at the halfway point, it'll stop the big one from happening, right? Because I'm gonna close that gap there and stop that main note from happening. But it's still gonna let the other one happen because I'm not. It's still able to vibrate across there if I put my finger right in the exact middle spot there, because it's not moving in that spot, right? Okay, so here I'll strike the string, and then I'll put my finger at that exact halfway point. You hear, and you'll hear what happens. Now I'm not fretting that note. I'm just putting my finger there to stop that big vibration from happening. And instead of this note, I'm getting this much higher note. In fact, it's one octave higher, okay? So if I cut my string in half, it'll go up one octave. It'll go up one octave, and I don't even have to fret to make that happen, because that's already happening when I strike the string. But that's not all, okay? In addition to that two-piece wave going on the string, there's also a three-piece one. Getting back to my little chart here, the third one down. So it's also vibrating. There's another wave in there that's three pieces, right? That's equally three pieces, okay? And that's yet another harmonic. And if I stick my finger down at one of those nodes, so at exactly 1/3 of the way up the string, I'll get another harmonic. Okay, so I strike the string, and then I could get this halfway one. But if I go 1/3 right here, again, I'm not fretting that. If I fretted it, it would sound much lower. Okay, but I'm not fretting. I'm just sticking my finger down at that little node right there. And so now I've stopped the other things from vibrating, but I've got this 1/3 one happening. It was at the other third spot up here. Same thing would happen. Okay. That happens to be right at the 7th fret. Okay, the 7th fret is 1/3 of the way across the strings. Okay. Also, I can do that with 1/4 of the way. Okay. So there's another one. So I've got this big one. I've got the 2-part one. I've got the 3-part one. I've got the 4-part one. And the 1/4 mark happens to be right at the 5th fret. Okay. So if I put my finger there, I get an even higher note. Because it's just the vibration from here to here that you're hearing at that point that's being allowed to vibrate on the string. But when you strike the whole string, all of that is happening at the same time. All of that, including other ones. You can keep going, right? 1/5 of the way, 1/6 of the way, 1/7 of the way. All of those are happening. How strongly they come out colors the way the note sounds, okay? And so lots of different instruments have what's called different timbre. And what's controlling the different timbre of the instruments is how much these different kinds of harmonics, how apparent they are when the note is being produced, okay? If it's just a pure note, it doesn't sound very complicated. It sounds boring. It sounds like a computer. Boo! Okay? But with a guitar, there's a lot of complexity going on with how the string is vibrating, and all those harmonics are in there. Now, depending on how you're playing the guitar, you can make those harmonics more or less apparent. And what happens when you use distortion is it brings out those upper harmonics. Okay, so it's not playing one note, really. It's playing a bunch of notes. It's playing this note, 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 and other notes too. And when I hit the distortion, it actually makes those come out more and make the sound more complex. Okay, that's one reason people like that distorted sound. Okay? The problem is, when I'm playing a whole bunch of strings at the same time, that all of those harmonics coming out so strongly, they start to interfere with each other because there's different harmonics on every single string. And so they start to kind of make a big mushy mess, right? So when I play a G chord, I mean, there's a lot going on in there. It doesn't sound terrible, but it sounds a lot muddier than it does when I'm just playing without distortion. Because you can't hear all those upper harmonics as much, and they're not interfering with each other. Well, that's why, long explanation, but that's why when we use distortion, we like to go to power chords because they're much simpler. There's just 2 or 3 notes with the octave, and the harmonics of the 1st and the 5th are very closely related to one another, and so they don't interfere with each other as much, right? And the octaves have very, very similar harmonics. I mean, you know, the higher octave note is one of the harmonics of the lower note, right? And so it's it doesn't get as muddy, right? So a G power chord, even with distortion, doesn't sound as muddy as this with the thirds in it. You hear the difference in that kind of muddiness, okay? And so, and that's one of the reasons why we like the power chord, especially when we're using distortion, okay? By the same token, the power chords, when it's clean, they can sound a little empty when you don't have distortion. So it sounds more complex with when you have the distortion in there. Okay, it's a different sound, but you've got to kind of pick and choose how you use power chords because of that difference. And if you're playing clean, you may not want to use power chords. You might want to use bar chords or open chords when you're playing clean. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. There's one other way to play these chords that I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, anytime that you play just the first and the fifth, you're playing a power chord. Okay, so anytime you figure out how to do that, it's a power chord. But there's one other kind of common thing that happens with power chords that I want to make sure that you understand. Okay, and that is to invert the power chord. Okay. When you're playing, let's go back to our C one here for a second, okay? So I'm playing it with my, on the 3rd fret of my A string and the 5th fret of my D string, okay? So I'm playing a C note and a G note. Well, there's another place right nearby where I could get a G note, all right? I don't have to play this G note. Where is there another G note? Well, there's another one right here beside my C. So down here, on my E string, on the 3rd fret, there's a G note. So I could, instead of playing C, G here, I could play C, G here, all right? And so I just kind of turn the thing upside down. I'm playing the 5th below the root note, right? That's an inversion, it's called, okay? And so when I do that, I'm still playing a power chord because I'm playing the 1st and the 5th. I've just put the 5th below the root, okay? Now, it sounds different. It's still a power chord. It's still the same chord, okay? But it sounds different because there's only a 4th in between the notes now. Whereas when they stacked the other way, there was a 5th between them. But when I turn them upside down, there's only a 4th between them. And that's a slightly more dissonant sound, okay? But that often happens when people play power chords. And sometimes you'll be listening to a record trying to figure out a song and they're playing power chords, but one or two of them sound different and you can't quite figure out what they're doing. And sometimes it's that they're playing them inverted like that, okay? And sometimes they do it because they like the sound, they want a little more dissonance in there. Sometimes they do it just because it's easier and they're playing something else over top of it or something. But that's a common way of playing power chords, is to flip them upside down. You can also invert them by just playing, when we played the 3-note version of the power chord, the upper 2 notes are already that inverted. So if you drop the low one and just play the upper one, you're playing it inverted, okay? So let's go back to the C just to make sure we're following here. We've got our C on the 3rd fret of our A string. We've got our G on the 5th fret of our D string, right? And then we've got that octave up here. So another C on the 5th fret of our G string. Okay, so we've got those 3 notes, right? But if we don't play the low one, the low C, now we're just playing a G and a C, right? And that's the inversion, right? Because now we've got our G below our C. There you go. So that's another way of accomplishing the exact same thing, okay? All right, so one last thing about power chords in terms of how to play them is sometimes you want to use the 1-3 that we've been using in this lesson so far. First finger on the root note, 3rd finger on the 5th on the next string. Well, sometimes people don't use their ring finger. They will use their pinky, their 4th finger instead. So you just pick up the 3rd finger and use your 4th finger. Okay, I'll try to get my other 2 out of the way there so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. Same thing, right? Just using a different finger. Okay. Now, some people find that more comfortable. Sometimes you have other things you want to do with these fingers, playing something else lower or something in between. You're going back and forth or something, whatever. There's different reasons to do that. The way that one of the main reasons I think that people do this, and the reason that I often do it, besides comfort sometimes, or just wanting to do something different because your hand's getting kind of tired from doing the same thing. You're playing a song with a lot of bar chords in it, and if you switch it to the pinky, sometimes it gives you a little rest, okay? But the main reason besides all that is because there's this really typical thing that happens in tons and tons of rock music where you're kind of working the lower note down, okay? So you start here with your power chord, and then you maintain the higher note, but you slide your index finger down 1 fret. Okay, so you go from here to here. And I have a chart here where I'm demonstrating it with the G. Okay, so I've got the G power chord, and then instead of playing a G with my index finger, I'm going to slide down 1 fret and play an F sharp instead. Okay, and this happens because people want to have a descending bass line as they're playing through a song. So here's one song that does it. Recognize that? Hold on loosely. Okay, and so they want that descending feel in the chord progression, okay, and so they do that kind of slide down. And so what you got when you slide that down is not a power chord. Just want to be clear about that. Once we have those things, instead of being 2 frets apart, we've got them 3 frets apart. That ain't a power chord anymore, okay? Because what you've done is you're actually, when you're in the G situation, when we go G, and then we start playing GD, and then we slide down 1 fret, that's an F sharp, and that's a D. So what we've actually done is switched from a G chord to a D chord, and we're putting the 3rd in. That's the 3rd. You still got your D. That up here, that becomes your root note. But now you've got an F sharp, which is the 3rd of the D chord. So now you're not playing a power chord anymore. You're playing a D chord. Right? Now you could have played a G and then played a D, but then you don't get that descending bass line thing, right? And so. So when you hear that, now you'll know what's going on, okay? They're going from the G to a D, but they're doing it by inverting the chord, basically, and playing the 3rd below the D, below the root. Okay, and it's the same thing on that hold on loosely lick. You're starting here, you're actually starting on an E, and then you're going to a B, and then you're going to a D, and then you're going to A. Okay, by doing that. Okay, and so the 1st and the 3rd chord in that are power chords, but the other 2 are not. Okay, now. All of that to point out that happens a lot, and it'll help you learning songs if you're aware that that's what's going on, okay? But also to point out that that's a great place when you're going to have to do that to use your pinky when you're making the power chord, right? Because this is quite a stretch. If I'm doing it with my 3rd finger and I got to go down to this F sharp, I can do it. But it's a stretch, and it's much easier if I'm playing the power chord with my pinky, and then I go down here with my index finger. It's much easier to make that reach. That's not a stretch at all. It's nice and comfortable. And so you'll see people doing the power chords with their pinky for that very reason, because they're going to do that stretch next. Right, leave their pinky there. Just move their index finger. Okay. All right. I think that's about it. Holy moly. We're at the end of the course. I don't know what to say. I'm tearing up. I feel like, I don't know, we should have a ceremony or something. Well, maybe after the next 2 lessons. Okay. All right. That's it for Power Chords. It's lots of fun, super useful, easy thing to add, and absolutely critical, central to your garage band guitaring. Okay. Next lesson, we'll do a bunch of songs with power chords, and then we'll do that last little coda lesson, and we'll be out. See you next time.